So we're going to be talking about ADHD in children today. And just before we get started, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So Royal Far West acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and the ongoing and important wisdom shared through their continued connection with the land, waters and community. I would specifically like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on today, which is the Darug people, and the Gayamagal people, whose land our Centre for Country Kids is on in Manly. So just a bit of an agenda today. So we will be talking a little bit about neurodiversity and the neurodiversity affirming approach. We're looking at Royal Far West's model of care around ADHD, how we support it, how we assess, things like that. We'll be looking at why and how we diagnose. We'll be looking at what ADHD is. We'll look at some strategies, some strengths, and then there'll be time for some questions at the end as well. And so thanks to Rebecca for introducing me. My name is Jackie and I'm a clinical psychologist on the Schools and Early Years program, and I've been with Royal Far West for just over 3.5 years now. And so I guess a lot of the kids that I see do have various forms of neurodivergence, which we will talk about a little bit later as well. And I also just wanted to share that ADHD is something that's really important to, I think, our organisation as a whole, as we're building a greater understanding of what it is and how it impacts people. But I also hope I can bring a bit of a personalised approach to this presentation, as well, as I myself have ADHD and was diagnosed in my late 20s. So it was, I've got that personal touch that I can bring to this as well. And just some housekeeping. Please do whatever you need to be calm and regulated and to focus best. We know that everyone focuses and attends in different ways. Some people like to stand, some like to walk around. Some people are very comfortable sitting and staying still for a period of time. Do what you need to do, take breaks as you need. If you need something in your hands, that's absolutely fine as well. Very much encourage you to do what feels right for your body. And as Rebecca said, if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box at the end and we'll have time to come back to them. So starting right at the beginning, what is neurodiversity? I wanted to briefly explain the term neurodiversity and what it means to be neurodivergent. So neuro means brain and diversity just means different. Every brain is different. We know this. It's what makes us all different from one another. And this matters because our brains control everything we do. This means that different brains result in differences between different people. And neurodiversity actually captures the two components that we'll talk about of neurodivergence and neurotypical. Where neurotypical is how the average person might function and what their brain is like, and neurodivergent is anything outside of that average. And so the term neurodiversity is an umbrella term, and it really positions neurodevelopmental differences like ADHD, autism, Tourette's, and learning differences as natural variations in human neurology rather than deficits that need to be fixed. So instead of a deficits-based approach, which focuses on needing to fix the impairments, the neuroaffirming approach states that all neurotypes have unique strengths and support needs. And we really aim to frame things in a way that we're looking at the environment's role in supporting these unique needs. And this concept is really important to understand, as the current estimate is that 15 to 20% of the world's population is neurodivergent. That means is different to the average. And if you're thinking about a classroom of kids or even your family, that roughly equates to 1 in 5 that will have a type of neurodivergence. And I think even more so here at Royal Far West, our caseloads are really heavily skewed towards neurodivergent populations. And I was looking at my personal caseload a couple of days ago, and I would estimate that actually at least 75% of my current kids are neurodivergent, which is obviously a really high proportion and much higher than the actual rate of neurodivergence in the world's population. So we can see that these are the kids that are needing more support, and they're the ones that are accessing our services. Now, whilst neurodiversity covers all sorts of different brain types, neurotypes, we're focusing today mostly on ADHD. So looking at how we tend to look and diagnose ADHD within Royal Far West, this is a little map that looks at how we support families who have come through our paediatric development program, which is the face-to-face assessment service that Royal Far West offers. Now, most of the material that I'm going to talk through today is covered in the psychoeducation groups that our paediatric development program actually offers to parents and carers of every child who has received a diagnosis of ADHD. And we find that parents and carers may have different responses to diagnosis, and their thoughts and feelings might also change over time. For a lot of parents, they tell us that there's a huge sense of relief to gain a reason or just a name for the difficulties that their child and their family have had ongoing for a while. Others also understandably share some fears about what this might mean for their future, and how other people might perceive their child with this label. Most parents are responding that it's a mixture of all of the above. And so we provide support along the journey of understanding. We provide them with space and time to gather the information to understand the diagnosis and to experience and process all the emotions that go along with developing that understanding as well. And then in our other programs like schools and early years, which is where I work at the moment, we often play a role in screening for ADHD. So we won't diagnose it directly ourselves just because there are certain limitations over telehealth. But we will provide a really comprehensive report to families. We have that discussion with them and with school about some of the difficulties they're seeing. And then we will always recommend for families to take the report to a paediatrician for formal assessment. And so I guess one of the main questions is, well, why do we diagnose ADHD in the first place? What are the benefits of doing that? And the only reason we diagnose ADHD is to benefit the child. It's a really useful tool or framework which allows us to gain a greater understanding of a child and their behaviours. We access decades of research and clinical expertise to guide the strategies that we then recommend for supporting these children. And it may also mean that they, for the first time, can access certain accommodations at school that really mean they can experience success and have a positive outcome from the school environment. We know there are common fears of labelling children or how this will impact how others see their child. And these are really important worries to voice with your care team. I think the good news is that we are seeing society slowly change and be aware and accepting of neurodiversity. And when identified correctly, ADHD is known to have some of the best outcomes when those interventions and supports are done right. Another reason is that one of the most important relationships a child has is actually with themselves. So knowing that there is a valid reason for their difficulties can often be a huge relief for the child as well. They might be blaming themselves and being labelled at school as the naughty kid or the kid that annoys other people, the kid that is always picked last and no one wants to actually play with. This label can actually provide a certain level of understanding from peers, from teachers, but also for the child themselves, which I think is really important. So let's have a look at how ADHD is actually diagnosed. There are a few professionals that can make these diagnoses, and they are pediatricians, psychologists, and psychiatrists. GPs play a really important role in the assessment pathway, but they cannot diagnose themselves. So GP is always your first place to visit because they will refer you to the best place to get an assessment completed. And the assessment process can involve standardized questionnaires that are often completed by parents and teachers. It might include a parent interview, might also include an interview with the child. At Royal Far West, we tend to include a cognitive assessment as well. This is not always required, but it does provide us with really helpful information, especially around how to support a child better in the schooling system. And it might also include a classroom observation or talking with the teachers around what they're seeing in a school context. And for ADHD to be diagnosed, traits must have been present for at least 6 months and prior to the age of 12. Now, this does not mean all traits have to be present, but some have to be present. And so I think just thinking about how many adults are now getting diagnosed, this can often be a bit of a barrier to getting that later adult diagnosis if they actually can't remember their childhood or their parents can't remember their childhood. It can be hard to actually meet that criteria. The presence of significantly reduced quality of social or academic functioning also needs to be present. So we need to see that there is, unfortunately, a negative impact on a child's social or academic functioning as a result of these difficulties. Some of the questionnaires that you might come across if you're going through a diagnosis would be the Brown Attention Deficit Disorder Scales, not as commonly used these days as what they used to be. The Vanderbilt, which is preferred by lots of pediatricians and psychiatrists. And then there's the Conners as well, which is also another popular one. I believe the Vanderbilt is used mostly by our pediatric development program, and us on schools and early years, we tend to use the Conners a lot more. It's just more easily accessible for families and teachers to complete that one by themselves. And again, questionnaires are never used by themselves to diagnose, but they do help us to get some of that really important data and determine whether certain traits are present. Now, it's important to know as well that ADHD often occurs alongside other types of neurodivergence. And some of these might need to be ruled out when diagnosing ADHD as well, as they can present really similarly. So things that often occur together with ADHD, and you can have multiple diagnoses at the same time, would include things like specific learning disorders. So that is your difficulties in reading, writing, and maths. And whereas reading, we would commonly know as dyslexia, for example. Language disorders, oppositional defiance disorder, conduct disorder, autism, anxiety, depression, trauma, and insomnia. Now, this is not to say that every child with ADHD will also have one of these conditions. It's just to say that they are more likely to also have one of these. And thinking about the kids that we see and families that we work with every day, there are some really significant challenges faced by our rural and remote families. And some of these we might also see in our metropolitan regions, but a lot of them are unique. So there's a real shortage of professionals. There's limited access to paediatricians and psychiatrists and also psychologists in these areas to do these assessments. When there are professionals available, it's often very limited. So you might not have much choice. There's a really long wait time for these specialists. I know some of the kids I'm working with at the moment, I'm being told it's a 2 to 3 year wait to access a paediatrician, for example. There's also really high cost for these families in accessing private professionals when their options may be more limited to public supports. But then within the public system, we do have some difficulties with a shortage of expertise and just the training that those professionals receive is often not up to the same standard, or they might not have specialised in things like ADHD. So unfortunately, we do see some kids that are missed or misdiagnosed. There's also obviously geographic limitations. You know, I've got some kids who I've actually got a lot of kids at the moment in Longreach who are in about the middlest point of Queensland as you can get. And their closest professionals are 6 hours away in Mackay or closer to 10 hours away in Brisbane. And that's, you know, especially if you're trying to work with a paediatrician around starting medication or things like that, where you actually do want frequent appointments, that is a really, really long way to travel and a huge commitment that not every family can actually make. Our healthcare system is also just really complex at the moment, whether you're navigating private systems or public systems. And so that can be really tricky on families that already have so many demands on their capacity. And then, of course, there are socioeconomic factors that impact access to that real quality care and the care that we would recommend. It's inaccessible to some of these families. So let's have a look now at what is ADHD. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects millions of people worldwide. And neurodevelopmental essentially means it's a difference in your brain that you are born with. The cause is not fully understood. There's lots of ongoing research in the area. And at the moment, we believe that it's a combination of genetic and environmental factors. We know that there are genetic components and that it runs in families. So if someone in your family has ADHD, could be a mum, dad, uncle, even a cousin, then you are predisposed and more likely to be diagnosed. It's also a really complex condition. There's no single gene, which is the sole cause. It's likely to be multiple genes interacting with each other and the environment. And so ADHD is quite common. Our current statistics have us saying that approximately 5% of children, and that is 1 in 20. From what I see and observe, and from where research trends seem to be going at the moment, we suspect this is a huge underestimate. And we certainly are seeing a lot higher rates of diagnosis coming through at the moment. And I believe that's because of our research helping us to correctly identify children more, and even adults. The rate at which we're seeing adult diagnoses occur is telling us that we are missing these people when they're in their childhood. We do know as well that it is more frequently diagnosed in boys than girls. The current ratio is suspected to be 2 to 1. So for every 2 boys that are diagnosed, 1 girl might be diagnosed. And this is again looking at children, so really in that under 12 range. And again, we know that this is likely to be underrepresentative of the true rate, especially for females. Boys are also more likely to be diagnosed with the hyperactive subtype, and girls are more likely to be diagnosed with the inattentive presentation, which I will talk through right after this. And I'll hopefully help to explain a little bit about why that might be the case. So there are essentially 3 types of ADHD. There is our inattentive type, which is the one that girls are more likely to be diagnosed with. There's the hyperactive impulsive type. And then there is what we call the combined type, and that just means they meet the criteria for both inattentive and hyperactive impulsive. And so what does this actually look like when we're observing it? Well, first we're going to talk about some of the behaviours you might see in some of these kids. So when we're looking at inattention, we are talking about kids who are really easily distracted. They might have difficulty staying on task or following instructions. They might lose track of conversations, literally mid-thought. They might forget to hand in their homework or lose or misplace items that they actually need. So in a classroom, for example, it might be the kid that, always forgets to get their lunch out, or they forget their homework at home. Sometimes they might appear as though they're actually not listening when they're being spoken to. They might be off with the fairies, is a common way these kids are described. They might make really careless mistakes in their work or even at home, things they can do, but they got wrong because they just weren't giving it their proper attention. And they might daydream or zone out in class. When we're looking at hyperactivity, we are looking at there being lots of movement, kids who can't sit still, people who are fidgeting or stimming, and I'll come back and describe what stimming actually is. They might have difficulty staying seated when that is the expectation. They might appear to be on the go all the time or to just have really high energy levels. They might talk excessively, and they might find it hard to do classwork or to play quietly. Now, stimming. So stimming is self-stimulating behaviour, and this is really common in individuals with ADHD, but also with autism. And it often looks like a repetitive movement or a sound. And it's done because it can be really regulating, and it can help us to focus or deal with dysregulation from sensory or emotional triggers. And so for some people, it's making noises out loud. It might be tapping a leg. It might be twirling a hair. Really anything that is repetitive that has a soothing nature to it. And a special note for females, they definitely can have hyperactive traits as well. Often what the case is though, is that this hyperactivity is more internalized. It might be that their mind is constantly racing with different thoughts. They might be having a conversation, but then at the same time also having a side conversation in their head about what could come up next. There might be multiple trains of thought at the same time, or it could be more subtle externalized behaviors, such as playing with fingernails or twirling your hair or quietly bouncing a foot or a leg, as opposed to getting in and out of your chair constantly. And when we think about impulsivity, so this goes together with the hyperactivity, this is where we've got kids who act without thinking. They might have difficulty waiting for their turn. They might blurt out answers before the questions are even finished. And they might interrupt other people in conversations or in games. Now, I don't know if you've heard of the term masking, but it is definitely a big theme in society at the moment. Masking is hiding or suppressing feelings and behaviours to try to fit in and to protect the relationships that we have with the people around us. It ultimately is underpinned by the idea that if we show people how we feel and do what we need to do to feel better, it will actually negatively impact the relationships. Masking is something that many of us actually do, whether we are neurodivergent or neurotypical. However, it is much more prominent in our neurodivergent populations, especially females. And this is because it's already more difficult for them to achieve that sense of safety within their social groups. And so they feel like they have to essentially be on performance. And I guess when behavior is approached in a way that doesn't recognize the brain-based reasons for behavior, it can lead to compliance. But if the underlying needs are not met, it's difficult to maintain and can lead to burnout and the person disconnecting from their own experiences. So this is why we see kids at school who might be masking all day long at school to try to appear normal and the same as their peers. And then we hear that when they get home, they have these huge emotional meltdowns because they're finally in a safe space where they're not feeling like they have to perform. It's also why in a lot of females who tend to mask even more than their male counterparts, we see diagnoses being missed because they are so good at hiding them. And so what does masking actually look like? Well, it can look like suppressing those stimming behaviours that I talked about earlier. So it might be those kids who are fighting really hard to sit there still all day, not do anything wrong. They might be ignoring their own sensory needs. So they might know that they need to get up out of the desk to move their body, but they don't. They might hide their feelings or be really careful about what they say. In fact, some kids take that to an extreme that they're so worried about what they say or noises they make that they actually don't speak at all. Stimming is really regulating for anyone who engages in it, so suppressing it can be really harmful. Can also look like checking your work a lot. Can look like, I already mentioned, ignoring sensory needs, suppressing the energy to appear calm, and acting out different roles and personas as well. Might even develop some scripts for social situations and hiding your feelings. Okay, so looking inwards, we've talked about what ADHD looks like from the outside in terms of behavior, but what's actually happening inside the brain? And where are some of those differences? Because remember, we talked about neurodivergence, meaning different to the average brain. So that does imply that there are differences, and there are. Doesn't make them any less, but it's different. So if you're comfortable, have a think about an average morning for a child getting ready. You might be going back to your own childhood experiences, or you might be thinking about a child that you have at the moment. And think about the behaviors of this child, where there are moments of difficulty. Maybe they're taking a really long time to get dressed, or they're getting overwhelmed by all the things that have to be done around the house. They might lose their homework. You might have to keep reminding them of exactly what you have to do next, even though they do it every single morning and it might be the same routine again and again. They might not be able to remember all the steps to get ready. For many families across Australia, the morning routine is often a real pinch point for the day, and it can be a time of huge stress for parents and also for the kids. And for children in rural and remote communities, the challenges are often even greater. For example, you might have until 8:30 to leave the door, because then you've got to drop the kids at school by 8:45, and that you have enough time to do that provided you're out the door at 8:30. For some of the families that we work with, they have to travel upwards of 60 minutes to get to school in the first place. So they've got a lot less time to be utilising in the mornings. And we know that the morning routine, just getting ready to get out the front door, requires a huge amount of planning, organisation, and actually getting tasks done. And the skills that we're using to get these things done are executive functioning skills. So we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at our executive functioning. You might recognise some of these things in a child or in yourself. And the reason that I'm going to talk through executive functioning skills is because these are the areas that ADHD directly impacts. It won't necessarily be every single area that I mention. It might be a combination of them. But I think having a certain understanding about what is going on in these areas and how that is impacted for people with ADHD, again, it just helps us to understand a little bit more and helps us to accept and also provide the right strategies for support. So I'm going to talk us through task initiation, focus, sustained effort, managing emotions, working memory, and monitoring and self-regulation. Now, extensive research suggests that ADHD is associated with underlying impairments in these executive functions. Now, a very simple way of trying to, understand this concept is thinking of an ADHD brain as an orchestra without a conductor. So the conductor is responsible for coordinating and managing the whole orchestra. It doesn't matter how well the musicians play their instruments, they're not very likely to produce good music if they're not being told when to start, at what speed, at what volume, and how to play together. And it is the conductor's role to do this. What happens in ADHD is we might have all those individual skills, we might have all the individual musicians to our brain, but the conductor is often missing. So it's really hard to coordinate and manage these skills. And a mistake that's often made is to think that people with ADHD are just being lazy or they're not trying hard enough. And Russell Barkley is an American neuropsychologist and a very well-regarded ADHD expert, and he summarizes it very briefly by saying ADHD is not a problem of skills, it's a problem of doing. And so everything we do is looking at how we support an individual with ADHD to use these skills effectively. So task initiation. This is sometimes also referred to as activation. And if we think about what we're actually saying here, task initiation, it's difficulties with getting started. So we might recognize kids or adults not knowing where or how to actually start a task. They might have difficulty prioritizing information and tasks. They might also have difficulty estimating the time needed for certain tasks. When we're looking at focus, we might see difficulties with staying on one task, sustaining that attention and focus. We might see someone who is easily distracted. We might also see a thing we call hyperfocus, which is where someone can become so intensely focused on a particular topic or activity of interest. And they might be unable to shift focus or appearance of anxiety about finishing. You might hear things like, I just need to finish. I can't do that right now. I'm almost done. Let me keep going. When we look at effort, we are looking at kids who are perhaps fatiguing a lot more easily than their peers or siblings. This is because they're putting more effort into everyday activities compared to the person next to them. They might have sleep problems. So maybe they're hyper aroused and overstimulated and actually can't switch their mind off to go to sleep. Or the opposite, in that they are so overstimulated, they want to sleep for 12 hours. They can have difficulties processing information and need more time. They might need repetitive movement, stimming, to stay alert. And at times, they might overcompensate by rushing through tasks. And then this is where we're going to see those things like careless mistakes. Now, when we think about memory, children with ADHD don't have memory difficulties specifically. It's more that they struggle to organize the information and store it in a way that they can effectively then access it again. And so when we do a cognitive assessment, for example, if we're doing a WISC, we might see lower performance in things like working memory. And that's exactly what this is demonstrating. It will show us that these kids have difficulty retaining information and accessing it again. This might actually look like difficulty holding instructions or information in mind. So maybe when you give them 3 instructions at a time and one of your children can do it, no worries. You've got another one who maybe does the first part and then has forgotten the rest of the instructions. And they also might have difficulty retrieving information from their long or their short-term memory. Managing emotions. So a lot of our kids with ADHD and our adults will have a low threshold for challenging emotions, for frustration, for irritability, for boredom. And they might be quite reactive if they do become dysregulated. Often they feel feelings even more intensely than others. And this does mean that they're prone to losing perspective of the bigger picture. Because believe it or not, managing emotions is a part of our executive functioning skills. And then when we're talking about monitoring and self-regulation, we are really talking about them acting before they're thinking or acting impulsively, having difficulty reflecting on their own behaviour, challenges adjusting to the expectations of a situation or to transitions and changes in circumstances. Also, difficulties taking account of emotional feedback or the reaction of others. Now, what do we do to support these kids? Because I know I've just identified some areas of real difficulty for these kids. And we know there are many positive outcomes when the right interventions and supports are utilised. It's important not to expect immediate results. Behaviours become established over a long time. So any new strategies that we're trying to put into place are also going to take a bit of time to actually make a difference. And I want to make a note as well that, as I touched on before, there are some real additional challenges for our rural and remote kids that we're working with. And these include things like limited staff in schools to actually implement these strategies and to support these kids with ADHD. There's limited access to multidisciplinary care. So whilst we might recommend it's really helpful to have a psychologist and a speech therapist and an occupational therapist, The realistic nature of living in these areas is that that is just not possible. There can even be limitations in getting the correct diagnosis in the first place. But this is where our wonderful team of speechies, OTs, and psychologists can come in with supporting the families and schools that we work with to implement these strategies through our telehealth and, where available, our face-to-face support options as well. We really aim to utilise all available avenues of support, including working directly with the child, upskilling the education team, and working with families to ensure that the child is best supported within everyone's capacity. So let's talk about some of these strategies that we do utilise a lot every day. Remember, I said 75% of my kids are neurodivergent. I reckon 95% of that 75% have ADHD. So one of the big things we do is we talk about adapting the environment. It's really important for kids to know they are not the problem. So we're looking at things like charts and reminders and to-do lists, timers, breaking tasks into small achievable steps. We're looking to encourage motivation through rewards and tokens as well. Providing positive self-statements, frequent breaks. This is a really important one for our kids. Even as an adult with a fully functional brain, that does not happen until we're sort of 26, our attention span maxes out at about 45 minutes. But we'll see that we often are sitting here expecting to pay attention in meetings and things for up to 2 or 3 hours at a time, just like kids are often expected to sit in a classroom and concentrate for up to an hour. We need to set realistic expectations for all kids, but especially those with ADHD. So frequent breaks are a must, as are relaxation activities and visualizing and talking about future positive impacts of the task that they're currently working on to really try to get them motivated to engage in that work as well. We might use visual schedules. These are great and can be adapted for various ages. With really young kids, you might see one like this where there's lots of pictures to aid it. And then as they get older, it might actually just become some words, some keywords for a kid to remember, and that's okay. These can be really helpful, provided you're helping to redirect a child to look at the visual schedule, because they might actually forget to look at it in the first place. Physical movement is huge. So we know that heavy muscle work and deep pressure input aims to calm the central nervous system. And we can do this throughout the day, at home, at school, things like push-ups, things like going for a run, things like in a classroom, for example, asking an ADHD kid to, hey, can you go collect that box of books and bring it over to me? There are lots of opportunities for these to be put in throughout the day. Can also be engaging in extracurricular activities like your sport and dance and things like that. Often we recommend that there is a calm down area. It's amazing if this can happen at home and at school as well. Often at home it might be the bedroom, and that's okay. But this is a safe space for a child to go to when they do feel dysregulated, which it is going to happen from time to time. Even for a neurotypical person, we have moments of feeling really dysregulated. So having a quiet area at home and at school with lots of tactile objects can be really helpful, things that they can play with. I've been sitting here the whole time playing with my Nido ball, just rolling it around in my hands. It provides a safe space for the child to regulate. It might have things that allow them to move, play with weighted toys, lycra bands. And it's really important that the calm down area is never used as a punishment. It is not a consequence. It's something we want to try and use proactively to encourage a child to regulate by themselves. We also want to support a child's needs, so setting clear rules and expectations. And these are often family rules that you can agree on. Using rewards and reinforcement for positive behaviour. So if you're seeing something that you really like and you want to see more of that, let's praise it. Let's provide a reward for that behaviour, because we know that makes it more likely that it's going to occur again. And we want to comment on process, not the outcome. And so what this means is that we want to look at certain behaviours that might have led to a negative outcome, rather than looking at the child and going, you're the problem. This is what happened. We might go, oh, you took the toy from Johnny. I wonder if taking the toy from Johnny is what made everyone upset. It's also really important to support your own needs. So hydrate, engage in relaxation, walk in nature, all those really fun things, acknowledging your feelings, spending time with family and friends as well. Now, just a little bit on how to help children who do mask, because this is a really common thing that comes up. We want to be curious and understand their preferred ways of communicating. We want to show acceptance for who they are. And that might mean saying to them a few times a day, you're okay just the way you are. We want to speak to other children and family members about their neurodivergent child's communication preferences. Speak to teachers about how kids are communicating at school as well. We really just want to try and understand and accept all these differences, make them feel safe. And so we want to try to speak their language. Now, because this is always a question that comes up with ADHD, is the role of medication and what does medication actually do? Medication can be an amazing tool for people with ADHD. It can help their different parts of their brain work together. Remember that analogy with the conductor and the orchestra. Medication can essentially perform the role of the conductor. It's important to speak to a doctor about all the different options, because there are options. I know there are a lot of fears around medicating, especially the common stimulant medications, such as Ritalin or Vyvanse that you might hear about. It's also really important to know that you as a family have a right to make the choice that is right for your family. That may be accepting medication. It may be going, we want to try environmental strategies first. It's also really helpful to know that there are non-stimulant options too. A lot of families don't actually know that that's a thing that's available, and it's not commonly offered as the first line treatment because it's not as effective as stimulant medication. But it is something that you can specifically ask your doctor about if you're interested. Now, just a few strengths of ADHD, because there are plenty. It's not all negative. They can be really fun to be around. There's lots of high energy. They can get really excited about things. Lots of energy, really creative. They can have a really strong sense of justice, which at times can be challenging, but can also be a huge strength. They're often really good at thinking outside the box, at adapting to new situations and making really quick decisions. So I'm going to have a look at a few questions in the chat box. So why are boys more diagnosed than girls? Is it because they are more likely to be hyperactive and therefore symptoms are more visible? That is pretty much 100% correct. It is because The boys are more likely to have the hyperactive, impulsive subtype, and they are more likely to display those really disruptive behaviours in a classroom. So they're the ones that are drawing attention from teachers. Teachers are more likely to go home and say, hey, we got a problem. Can you please get your kid looked at? Whereas for girls who may still be hyperactive, but it might be more internalized, or they might be more inattentive, it's just missed. They often fly under the radar, which is really sad. And it's why we're seeing so many adult females getting diagnosed at the moment, because we're learning more, we're talking about it more, we're going, oh, that's actually really like me. I think lots of adults in general are seeing things like on TikTok, for example, people talking about their ADHD experience and going, that sounds just like me. So there are some benefits to social media as well.
We have
And then,
we've got
yeah,
another one here. So using the examples of a child getting ready for school, how does a parent identify the difference between typical challenges of age/maturity of getting ready versus ADHD symptoms and to investigate further? That's a good one.
that is a good one. And it's a really hard one. A lot of the ways that people tend to identify differences is actually just by comparing to siblings, which is definitely not foolproof, but it is a way that we do often find parents are first raising questions, is when they go, this was not what I experienced with my first, or, my second kid is doing things that my first is actually still struggling with. So there are a lot of comparison. And comparison, we don't generally love, but in circumstances like this, it can be really helpful to even talk to parent friends that you've got who have kids of a similar age. Talk about what their mornings look like. But the big thing for me is, if something is difficult for your family, then reach out for support. Even if you're being told that's normal, it might still be relatively within the realm of normal. But if it's causing you guys some challenges at home and you want help with that, you can access help for that. And then you've got a professional involved who will be able to say, it's normal, but here we can help, or we actually want to look at something else as well.
And I've got a few others that were
Yeah.
pre-submitted. So we've got how will ADHD affect my child later in life? Or in life, I guess,
Yep.
when they leave school.
Yep. And look, that's a really big one. It's something that I think a lot of people are a bit worried about. I would like to remind you of the fact that right at the beginning, I said that I have ADHD and I'm sitting here as a clinical psychologist. Um, I think it's really, really helpful to know that people with ADHD can live the life they want to live. It's not a barrier to anything they want to do. It's about trying to work with their brain and find professions, find outlets that really work to their brain's advantage. And so, for example, there will often be things, we talked about hyperfocus as well. What are your kids, what are your teens, what are your adults really interested in? This goes for anyone. We try to build careers and our futures around the things that interest us. And I think a real strength of those with ADHD is that they will do a really amazing job provided they're in something that is interested to them. And there might be some supports that we can continue to put in place. They might need constant reminders on their phone about things like paying bills. I have to set up direct debits, otherwise they're not getting paid on time. But I've learned that, okay, that's a strategy I have to do for me. So I think it's leaning into the people around you as well, but finding those things that work for your brain.
And you mentioned earlier, this is my question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it's a combination of genetic and environmental. So what kind of environmental factors would contribute to the cause?
Look,
Cause of
environmental
ADHD.
factors. Yeah. I think we're really talking about sort of that nature versus nurture. argument there, which is an ongoing argument, and most of us acknowledge that there are components. When I'm talking about environmental factors, I guess I envision it as though you might be genetically predisposed to something, and then there might be factors that impact whether or not those certain behaviours become expressed. And so, we are looking at things like your family systems, how your family might function, what is important to you guys, what things you're exposed to in the environment as well. But I think a really important note is that, I think it's a really important distinction for me to make, that your actions alone as a parent cannot decide whether your child does or does not have ADHD. That's not anything that your actions are doing.
That's great to know. Not that I'm a parent, but
Yeah.
okay. And you also mentioned that some of these conditions can coexist.
Mm-hmm.
So why do they coexist?
Look, that's a great question. I don't think we have a very clear understanding of why. We just have the rates of them, and so we know that they do. I feel that, again, it's about that predisposition to how your brain just develops, how your brain is made while you're developing, and those predispositions, those genetic links that might be there. We just know that if you have one condition, you are more likely to have another one. It's not guaranteed, but it seems like, I think there's probably a lot more research that needs to be done in the area, but we do know that that link is there.
And I think we've got one more, unless
Yeah.
we have one from anyone else. No. So can you tell us a specific child that you've helped with ADHD? What were they going through before, and what did life look for them after?
Yeah. My main focus when I have kids with ADHD is around normalizing their experience and trying to increase that acceptance and awareness from the people around them. So I've got a particular child at the moment who I'm working with, and whilst I'm working with them directly to try and help them understand their brain, what they might need some additional help with, and what things they're really good at, because we want to try and focus on some of those strengths, I'm also really working closely with the family and with the school around just trying to get some of that stigma out of the way and try and help them to understand that they can also help things. I think it's a very common, I wouldn't say a problem, but it's very common for adults and schools, for example, to think that medication is the ultimate fix for things like ADHD. And we also know that that's not always the case. It can help, but it's not a magic pill. So this kid has, by actually working with school and getting them on board with even things like having brain breaks every 20 minutes, just some of those environmental strategies, having those visual schedules available, having someone actually check in with the child and say, hey, did you understand the work that I just prescribed to the class? Do you know what we're actually doing? I've seen a kid gain so much more confidence engaging with their classwork. And also they're just feeling happier to be at school because I think they're not feeling like they have to mask or that they're struggling all the time. They're getting to experience those moments of success as well. And I think that's really come from educating the adults around them about how we can help promote success for these children, rather than expecting them to conform and fit in a society that's really not made for them and their brain type at the moment.
Oh, that's fantastic,
Yeah.
Jackie. I've thoroughly loved this presentation. Thank you so much.
No worries.
And I guess if you have any questions, we'll also share this recording within the next week. So, but please reach out if you have any questions. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.